They thought she was just another paint-splattered nobody. But beneath the dirt-caked fingernails and the silence, she carried a secret that could activate a military lockdown. What did a broke house painter know that made 3 black SUVs scream up to a bank 12 minutes later? Marla Denson, 37, worked as an independent house painter in the quieter corners of rural Arkansas. Her face was nearly always dusted with flecks of dried primer or eggshell gloss, a sort of accidental war paint. She wore the same faded overalls and scuffed-up Converse she'd owned for years, walking proof that she preferred comfort over style. Her utility jacket frayed at the cuffs and splattered in every hue from beige to blood red looked like it had stories to tell. Every weekend, like clockwork, Marla made her way to the local credit union to deposit whatever she'd earned that week, sometimes from touching up an old lady's porch, sometimes from repainting a trailer siding. $20, 45. Never much, but every bill had been earned under sun and sweat. The staff behind the counters recognized her face but couldn't have told you her name if their lives depended on it. Just another quiet fixture in the background, the paint lady who never complained about the long lines. That Saturday morning, Marla stepped into the bank holding a crinkled brown bag sealed with heavy-duty tape. She waited her turn, then stepped up to the counter with calm precision. "I'd like to withdraw exactly $500, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "20s and 10s, please," and gently slid her ID across the counter. The man next to hers licked back hair, shiny shoe snorted. "Carrying that kind of cash? Must have sold a golden garage," he chuckled. Marla didn't flinch. Her gaze stayed glued ahead, unmoved. The teller began counting her money. 2 desks over, a younger employee leaned to her coworker and murmured, "I bet that's not legal cash. Just look at her." The teller, Zoe, took a longer glance. Marla's fingers were cracked and stained with embedded paint white, mostly, but something darker at the edges. Unlike her coworkers, Zoe felt a wave of unease not about Marla, but about the whispering. "Here's your withdrawal, Miss Denson," Zoe said, handing over the bills. Marla gave a small nod, folded the cash into her weathered bag, and then, almost as an afterthought, slid a tiny folded note across the glass. "Could you make sure this reaches the right person?" she asked softly. Before Zoe could ask a single question, Marla turned and walked straight out, never glancing back. She didn't even take her receipt. Zoe, half curious and half bored, unfolded the note expecting a grocery list or weird poetry. Instead, the first line snapped her attention like a whip. "Urgent. If any personnel from Echo Squad 19C survived fax emergency code 44X, Raven to the number below." Below that was a fax number labeled Military Base, Southeast Region, and a single scrawled signature. MD Zoe's pulse spiked. Something about this didn't feel like a prank. With trembling fingers, she keyed the fax and sent it. Exactly 12 minutes later, a matte black SUV with government plates screeched to a halt outside the bank. 2 more vehicles pulled up behind it in a tight formation. A group of individuals in casual wear but with a certain unmistakable presence strode into the bank like they owned every brick. One of them carried a sealed envelope and a document stamped Federal Lockdown Order, South Base Command. Customers began muttering, some nervously clutching their phones. "Is this a heist?" someone whispered. "Are we being held hostage?" asked another. But the man stepping out of the lead vehicle didn't bark orders or flash weapons. He was smiling, beaming with what looked suspiciously like relief. Ever felt like people judged you by how you looked? Maybe even dismissed you like background noise? Right, well, Marla Denson was about to blow that idea into pieces. And if you're into stories where the silent ones turn out to be legends, stick around. The man in charge stepped forward, flashing a special operations insignia on his windbreaker. "Name's Commander Jace Rourke," he said evenly, placing an envelope on the counter. "Someone sent a fax from this bank today?" Zoe slowly raised her hand. "Yes, I did. It seemed urgent. The note said—" "I know what it said," the commander cut in gently. "And the sender is someone we've owed more than we can repay. For almost 10 years. The bank was dead silent. Even the hum of the AC felt loud. A boy, clutching a lollipop, tugged on his mom's sleeve and asked, "Who is she?" Commander Rourke turned to face the room. "She's the woman who saved an elite recon unit, using nothing but white paint." People blinked. Some chuckled in disbelief. But Rourke's face was dead serious. He explained that nearly a decade ago, during a failed joint training op, Echo Squad 19C was misrouted into a civilian industrial site. A gas leak from a chemical warehouse had begun to seep through the complex, and their gear communication, masks, vision systems all had failed. They were trapped, blind, and slowly suffocating. "The fog was thick enough to choke on," Rourke said quietly, eyes distant. "We couldn't see more than 2 feet in front of us. We were walking toward what we thought was an exit, but it was actually a containment unit that was going to be sealed off and incinerated." With chemical levels rising fast enough to kill within minutes, Marla, working a paint job near a collapsed warehouse frame, had spotted the disoriented unit wandering blindly toward doom. Without hesitation, she grabbed the bucket of white she'd been using and began splashing arrows and makeshift warning symbols directly onto the concrete and rusted barrels, marking a clear path out of the gas-filled zone. She never shouted, never showed her face, just painted in silence. Those crude markings had led the entire team out of the death trap. "She never told us who she was," Commander Rourke went on. "She vanished as quietly as she came. We tried to trace her through contractor rosters, paint supply, receipts, anything. But the only hint we ever had, her first name might have been Marla." Zoe's eyes flicked to her own paint-streaked fingers and back to the crumpled note. "So, that message today, her way of checking on us," Rourke confirmed, voice low. He opened the envelope he'd brought with him and gently slid out a piece of paper. It was the original fax. Beneath Marla's emergency code was a single, handwritten question. "I don't want credit. I just need to know, did you all make it out?" The bank manager, who had been watching the drama unfold with his mouth slightly open, finally asked, "Why now? After 9 years, why reach out today?" Commander Rourke's expression darkened. "Today marks exactly 9 years since the incident," he said. "And yesterday, a post on a veterans forum claimed several members of a classified ops unit had died from late-stage chemical exposure." False, but frighteningly specific. He tapped his tablet, revealing a still from the bank's camera footage. Marla, withdrawing cash. "We've been trying to find her for years, to thank her properly. That note finally gave us proof. She's the one. The painter who led 27 soldiers to safety with white arrows and nothing else." He pointed to the brown paper bag Marla had carried. "And that withdrawal, $500, Persislius, the same amount she's been anonymously sending every single month, to the widow of the only soldier who never fully recovered." Zoe's breath caught. "She's been sending money every month? For 9 years? To a family she doesn't even know?" "Never missed a payment," Rourke said. "Never left a name. No return address. Just the same anonymous envelope." The sharply dressed man, who had earlier mocked Marla's cash withdrawal, now sat slumped in his seat, staring at the floor, his face flushed with embarrassment. Rourke's phone buzzed. He checked the message, then looked up. "We've located her. She's on her way to Riverside Care Home, using the cash to cover her mother's admission fees." His voice dropped lower. "That $500, that was her entire savings." He placed a call on speaker for all in the bank to hear. "Confirm it," he said. "It's her, the woman from Operation Foglight." 15 minutes later, another black vehicle arrived. This one carrying a tall, silver-haired man with a visible limp. Retired Colonel Weston Drake stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking against the tile. When Rourke showed him the still image of Marla leaving the bank, the colonel's eyes welled up instantly. He took off his glasses, lips pressed tight, and whispered, "That's her, the one who saved my men with nothing but a paintbrush and a steady hand." The room froze again. The colonel's voice gained strength as he spoke. "We'd gone nearly 2 miles in the wrong direction. Radio's dead. GPS scrambled. And we were heading straight into a ruptured storage tank with vapor that could have melted our lungs. We had no clue. Until arrows." He smiled slightly, as if reliving a moment of magic. "Just faint white arrows. At first we thought we imagined them, but they kept appearing fresh, wet paint pointing the way. He described how, step by step, those arrows led them away from death and toward a narrow alley behind the plant. When they reached the evac point and looked back, the fog had lifted just enough to glimpse the trail, but the artist had vanished. At Colonel Drake's signal, 2 uniformed personnel stepped forward, carrying a modest wooden case. Inside was a neatly folded American flag, perfectly creased into a triangle, and a steel plate engraved with the words, Marla Denson, Civilian Hero, Special Ops Rescue Protocol, 44X Raven. This was approved years ago, Drake said quietly, but we never found her to give it. They couldn't hand it to Marla directly. She had already left, heading straight to the nursing facility where her mother waited, dependent on that very withdrawal to finalize her admittance. She hadn't stayed for praise. She hadn't even known what was coming. Within hours, the bank's exterior footage showing Marla in her dusty jacket and taped paper bag, stepping into the morning light, had gone viral. Shared across every platform, the image spread with a single line printed beneath it, number 500, for honor. All across the country, veterans began to come forward with their own quiet confession stories of unseen strangers who'd stepped in at just the right time. No names, no glory. Just silent acts of kindness that lingered in memory. At the bank, Zoe, the teller who had served Marla, shared something else that added a deeper chill to the truth. She comes in every month, always the same day, the 15th, always asks for the same amount, $500, never fusses, never late, even when the line's wrapped around the door. Bank records confirmed it. For exactly 9 years, Marla Denson had withdrawn $500 like clockwork. That matched perfectly with the anonymous deposits received monthly by the widow of Staff Sergeant Luke Tannerthy, one soldier who had lived through the chemical incident, but whose lungs were permanently scarred. He'd passed away 3 years later. 1 week after the events at the bank, Marla received a formal letter from the Pentagon, inviting her to accept a Civilian Medal of Valor. Her handwritten reply was short, almost defiant in its humility. Please reserve that honor for those who came home broken, or didn't come home at all. All I did was paint arrows. They walked into hell with no map. The letter was framed and placed in the National Defense Archives beside a security still captured from the warehouse camera 9 years earlier of Marla rinsing her hands with turpentine, a half-empty can of white paint sitting beside her boot. Outside the bank, Colonel Drake addressed a crowd of reporters who had gathered in the aftermath of the viral story. His words carried a weight no headline could. Sometimes the greatest heroes don't wait around for applause. They help because someone needs help. Then they vanish, before anyone can turn them into a symbol. The media tried everything to reach Marla. Phone calls, email. A production crew even staked out her neighborhood, but she declined every interview. The only request she made was that coverage focus on veteran assistance organizations, especially those helping families affected by off-the-books training incidents like the one she'd stumbled into with a brush and a bucket. Eventually, one stubborn reporter caught up to her mid-job, painting a back porch. His cameraman aimed the lens, but Marla didn't look up. All she said was, "I had paint. They needed directions. That's all it was. Don't turn that into more than it is." Then she dipped her brush and kept working. Who helped you once without needing to be seen? Leave their name, or just leave a single dot. Marla never returned to that bank branch, but some weeks later, every employee arrived one morning to find a small cardboard box on their desk. Inside was a tiny, sealed can of white paint and a folded note. Let each person have a chance to be seen as good. No one ever spoke about the incident again inside the bank. But something essential had shifted. Those who had once rolled their eyes at the paint-covered woman now kept a photo of her faint and blurry, taken from the ATM footage taped discreetly behind their stations, not for customers to see, but for themselves, as a reminder. And each month, without announcement or fanfare, the bank began transferring a portion of its outreach funds into a newly established nonprofit, the MD Foundation. An anonymous donor, its primary backer, ensured the foundation provided support to veterans' families affected by non-combat military accidents. especially those never reported publicly. Meanwhile, Marla continued painting trim and fences, continued heading home on foot, her gear slung over her shoulder and her worn paper bag tucked under her arm. But things were different now. People who once dismissed her with passing glances now offered small nods of respect. Some paused to shake her paint-stained hand. And one day, the same sharply dressed man who had mocked her at the bank found her again. He approached her at a duplex she was painting, eyes wet with regret. His voice broke as he explained his own son had just enlisted. Marla listened quietly, then reached into her back pocket, handed him a weathered business card, and said, "Tell him to look for the arrows." On the back of the weathered business card Marla handed the man was a handwritten number. "If he ever needs anything at all," she said calmly, "this line goes straight to Commander Rourke." She gave a small nod. "Tell him Marla sent you." Not long after, the nursing home where Marla's mother had been waiting quietly for months received an anonymous donation large enough to cover 5 full years of care. When Marla showed up, as she did each month, ready to make her payment, the front desk manager simply smiled and handed her check back. "It's all covered," she was told. Marla didn't ask questions. She just tucked the money back into her coat and used it to buy dozens of sketch pads, brushes, and paints for the Veterans Rehab Center across town. Then, on the anniversary of that long-ago night, the one still unspoken in official records, Marla opened her front door to find 27 cans of white paint stacked in perfect alignment on her porch. There was no note, none needed. She knew exactly what they meant. She took them, one by one, to the local VFW hall and began working on the bare concrete wall facing the parking lot. She didn't paint tanks or flags, no soldiers in uniform, no names. Just 27 white arrows reaching upward toward the sky in clean, deliberate strokes. When someone finally asked her what it meant, she looked at the wall and said only, "Direction, when it matters most." Greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives on scuffed sneakers, drops a folded note on a counter, and vanishes without asking for anything in return. Marla didn't take out that money to draw attention. She was honoring a vow, a silent promise made in the darkness, sealed in fog and paint. And the ending? It wasn't about convoys or fanfare. It was about how people saw her now. The change wasn't in what she wore or what she carried, but in the eyes of those who passed her on the street. In the nods, in the soft-spoken thank yous, in the quiet that followed recognition. If you've ever helped someone without expecting anything back, hold on. There will come a moment when that unspoken kindness stands tall against the noise, when silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. The real heroes? They're not waiting on applause. They're out there scanning the horizon, brush in hand, looking for someone else who needs an arrow pointing them home. She picked up the $500 from the counter, her hands still streaked with white and ash gray. The man beside her snorted again. "That kind of withdrawal? You must have hit the jackpot." No one noticed the old bag at her feet, or the wary nod from the security guard watching her from the corner. 3 minutes later, 3 military vehicles blocked off the lot. The air shifted. Who was this quiet woman in torn denim? And why had her simple transaction triggered a full-scale military response?